Dad was standing in the living room in front of the television set, and he was holding his head in his hands, moaning, "My son is a moron." Well, I just told my dad I would be hitchhiking across country and back. It was between my freshman and sophomore years in college. It wasn't the send-off I was hoping for from him. But as I took off to get into a new environment, because I was tired of this one, I recognized something. I went across the Rocky Mountains, went across over to Washington, D.C. I went up to Niagara Falls, to Montreal, and returned a month later. But here's what I found. I couldn't really get away. Wherever I went, there I was. Because what had really been bothering me was me. My habits, my temper, my lack of discipline. So the environment that I really sought, I figured I'm going to have to take that environment with me, and came to realize that I couldn't really get away unless the way got in me. Jesus is the way. When he gets in you and in me, we can enjoy the journey, enjoy that environment as well.
Good afternoon, or evening, actually. It's 7 o'clock. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us for another evening of 8 days, taking our first steps to better health. If you remember, we are focusing on the word creation. It is an acronym in this case. And the C is for choice, which we looked at 2 nights ago with Kayla Carmona. And then the R is for rest, and we're out of order based on people's availability to come and talk with us. And rest will actually be on Thursday, I believe, of this week. Then E is environment, which we're talking about today. A is activity, which we talked about yesterday. T is trust in God. I is interpersonal relationships. O is outlook, and N is nutrition. So today we are on day 3, looking at environment. And as we look at that, I want to turn your attention to one of our cards here. This is one of the pocket cards that you can get if you remember to let me know that you're tuning in each night. Just go ahead and comment right now. You can say, hey, you can say where you're tuning in from, and tell me something about your environment, okay? Yeah, what you got going on in your environment. This particular card on environment says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And that's from Psalm 19, verse 1. So we are talking today about environment in a way that perhaps is different from what you are used to thinking of when you hear the word environment. Before we get into our conversation, I want to share a little bit about environment that has been meaningful to me recently. Over the last year and a few months with this pandemic, my congregation, we've been meeting outside for worship until this past Saturday. This was the first Saturday that we've been back in the building. And being outside had its cons, like when it was really cold or when it was really hot. Um, There were never any bug issues, which is sometimes what keeps people indoors, but it also had some amazing pros. And the biggest is the most obvious to me anyway. We were outside. We were in nature. And we didn't realize what beautiful space we had outside of our church building until last June when we started meeting outside. We had no clue. We would leave the outdoors to go indoors every Saturday. Um, Other days of the week, we'd be doing things. And again, we would leave the outdoors and go indoors. And over the last year, we learned to treasure the environment. Well, I'll speak for myself. I learned to treasure the environment and to enjoy being in nature every single week. There were only, I think, 2 or 3 weeks where rain kept us from being outside. Environment plays such a huge role in our health. And that's why we're talking about it today as part of this 8 day series. And tonight I get to be joined by Beth and Chris Cope. Why am I forgetting your last name? Chris and Beth. Chris is a psychologist and Beth is a nurse, and they have three really awesome kids. And so I'm going to bring them on now. And welcome, guys. Welcome to day 3 of 8 days. And I'm going to have some questions for you tonight, starting with when you hear the word environment, what comes to your mind?
First thing that comes to my mind is what is around me, whether it's in my home or if I'm outside.
Yeah, no, I think that's very similar for me. I think it is almost everything that is not myself, and I guess in some ways it is myself too, because it may be the space that I'm contributing to, and I think even our the initial kind of first session that you mentioned there, or that you showed with our the video that introduced the topic, the speaker was talking some about the environment within himself. I think primarily, as an initial thought, definitely lines up more with what Beth said, which is the world around me and all that is composed of.
For many people,
Also,
when we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Beth.
sorry, I was just going to say one other thing that I was thinking about is if you're with other people, just how you're interacting with them, whether it's work environment or whether it's stressful or peaceful or whatnot.
And I'm glad that is what came to your mind when you thought of environment, because I'm sure that for many of us, when we hear the word environment, we jump automatically to environmental issues, concerns, that sort of thing, and that is part of this, but it's not all of it. And so yeah, we're going to be talking about the spaces in which we exist. Discussions about the environment here, at least in North America, can often become political in nature because we're focusing on things like global warming, uh, recycling, sustainability, things like that, that so often move from our day to day existence to the political sphere. And yet, the Bible tells us that we are stewards of the earth. So, how do you see your faith informing your environmental choices?
Mm. For me, it really challenges me in my core identity as a Christian. And where that comes from for me is the idea that you mentioned, which is God. Um, my faith and belief system is that God created me and put me here for many things, but among those was to take care of his creation. And so it's a core part of having the privilege of living on this earth. And so it is really a really important piece of my life spent on this planet.
Mhm.
I don't know if
What
I had
about you,
anything.
Beth?
I don't know if I had too much different to add than what Chris already did. Just as you said, God God asks us to be stewards and take care of, and whatever we take care of, whether it's our bodies, whether it's people around us, he asks us to be, to be so careful and treat everything with respect, and that includes, his earth that he gave us. He gave us this beautiful earth, and we have to do our best to keep it the way he gave it to us, in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember one time, as you mentioned, care, for what he's made, it triggered a memory for me where I was sitting outside, um, doing some homework with a classmate, and some kind of a bug landed on my arm or something, and I immediately just like flicked it off. And he said, "Why did you do that?" And my initial thought was, what else do you do with bugs? He was like, you could have just, you know, removed it gently and put it on the ground. And that has stuck with me, years later. What are the different things that we are choosing, to care about, big or small? Um, well, from the short amount of time that I've gotten to know you guys over these last, what, 5 months or so, I think it's fair to say that you guys think intentionally about the environments, that you've been able to curate, like your home, and that's where you're sitting outside of your home right now in your sunroom, which is a wonderful choice for our discussion. Um, what are some of the intentional environmental decisions that you've made about your home?
Well, I guess if I'm going to laugh immediately after you ask that question, I have to provide some context of that laughter.
Please do.
Uh, but I think the room that we're sitting in right now, if we call it a room, is a perfect example of that. Because I will have to say that as much as I love and appreciate nature, nature and I don't always get along, as it relates to environment. And one in the ways that does not happen, you talk about bugs and the tendency to want to remove them as quickly as possible. Um, I have that relationship with mosquitoes. And if you don't know anything about Georgia, there's a lot of mosquitoes. And so um, we were incredibly blessed to have an opportunity to build this amazing home out here. And one of the things that we did was we put in a screened in porch so that we can be in the environment and also not be constant murderers of nature. uh, so environment and I can exist in peace
In harmony.
and harmony. But beyond that, I would say we really challenge ourselves, and our home is a good example of this, to limit our impact on environment as much as possible. So that would be kind of, I think, a direct interpretation of environment. But I think another example of that is the environment that we create in our home, as humans and as parents, and as partners, um, that we're really thoughtful about. Kind of, I don't want to get all sort of um, silly about it, but what's the vibe, and what's the feel of our home? What's
Mm-hmm.
the, I guess, energy maybe is one way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
That is the environment we're creating for ourselves and for our children.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the things when you think about energy, or vibe? What are some of the decisions that you've made regarding those things?
Like, you mean like we have a solar powered, not a solar powered car,
Well, I think there's,
an electric car,
well, I mean,
that kind of thing.
once we get our solar panels up,
We're gonna
it'll
get
be
solar
It'll be solar
panels.
panel.
Um,
I think there's literal and there's, in that way, like
Right.
literally um, decreasing the environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I think another way to do that is when I think about our friends that are in interior design, and architecture, how every, when we really think about it, every single thing around us influences us
Mm-hmm.
in one way or another. We are in constant relationship with everything around us. And that is, in some way, not to be too philosophical, but I think that is really kind of the core dynamic of human's existence, is that
Mm-hmm.
we're in relationship with everything around us at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to be really intentional about everything, not to overthink it. We're definitely not probably naturally skilled at it from an interior design perspective, but we try to make up with it in intention. So it's, the kind of music that we would have playing. It would be the kinds of things that we watch or don't watch. It would be the way we decorate the house, even. Um, I think really it's part of, on some level, every decision that we make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, have you always been this intentional in your thinking about your environment, or is it something that's kind of developed over time?
I think definitely that develops over time. When you're young, when you're a teenager, when you're in your early 20s, you just, unless you're just spectacular, people just aren't necessarily thinking about that kind of thing yet. I know I wasn't, to a point. Um, so it's definitely grown more as we've gotten older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you see your kids responding to the environments that you intentionally create?
I see them responding in some ways like, really? That's the color that you picked? Or why can't we have that color? Um, or why is that music so soft? Can't we turn it louder?
Hmm.
Uh, One of our sons, Connor, is notorious for whenever he has a speaker, there's a speaker on in the house, he has to turn it up to 11 because he likes for the environment to be deafening. Uh, but I think they've all responded in their own ways. In the house that we moved into a couple weeks ago, um, they've had the opportunity to have more of a decision making capacity in their bedrooms because they have their own rooms for the first time.
Hmm.
And so that's been a really fun exercise to be part of, to see the choices that they make and why that is, and to try to help them come to terms with how to explain um, and find meaning in those choices that they're making.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a lot of fun.
Nice. I can only imagine what it must feel like as a parent to let your kids have that level of autonomy. My kids are a little too young for me to put that in their lap, but
Well,
They have. I don't want to oversell it.
they can,
okay.
They have partial
yeah.
autonomy.
Partial. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Like, for example, they decided where the bed goes
Okay. Okay.
and where the furniture goes.
Like the theme.
Yeah. But we didn't give them free reign to paint on the walls as they wanted.
Right. 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 There's some boundaries.
But it's fascinating because I think that the reality is that there's no way to do it. There's no one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, I think, one thing I've learned with life, and this is probably heavily influenced by my work as a psychologist, is that there are so many ways to do it um, in a way that can be quite healthy and quite successful.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And the more time I think we spend with other people in other environments and in other cultures and from other perspectives, we can really come to appreciate that
Hmm.
uh, and see the value in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the environment or to a environment, what are a few of your favorite spaces? And it doesn't need to be in your house, it could be wherever. What are a few of your favorite spaces and why?
I'd love to hear yours. I don't know if I have no idea what this answer would be.
Well, well, we just
Besides every environment that includes me, of course.
well, I love I will just since we moved into a house that's kind of it's got some land to it, and my wonderful husband here made me a little. We have a nice big front porch, and I have a swing on the front porch, so I love to go out and just kind of feel all my senses. I like to have some nice tea and sit and smell. I have some jasmine plants growing around
Mm,
the spot. Smell some beautiful things, see the beautiful landscape, hear the birds, and I don't know that's kind of my happy place right now.
yeah.
In the quiet, I'm about quiet. Definitely not loud blaring music like my son. Quiet. So, what about you?
I think that that can shift with what it is that I'm seeking exactly. I would say on an everyday general basis, having three kids in the house and two dogs and two cats, and it's not easy to find quiet. And so I've grown to really appreciate that. I've grown to appreciate moments that are simpler. And so coming out here on on the porch that we're sitting in right now, early in the morning, when I'm waking up, but nature is also waking up,
Hmm.
there's just something that's really solemn and peaceful about that.
Hmm.
Um, I think another really favorite place of mine is being on top of a mountain or in a place of high elevation where there's a view and there's unobstructed access to the sky.
Mm,
Uh, is a special has a special place in my heart spiritually.
hmm.
I think there's probably almost no other place on earth where I feel closer to God, and so that's special. Um, but speaking of loud music, there are definitely moments when I can appreciate that. And in my youth, I definitely appreciated that, especially the small room, large concert uh, environment. Although I've learned since then that I probably should have worn hearing protection. So you talk about things that you wish you would have known or have not had the pride to listen to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, my husband has absolutely zero shame, and I don't know if he was always this way, but we will be, in a place where it's loud, maybe the music is extra loud or whatever, and he'll go to the bathroom and come back with tissue for all of our ears. He's like, I don't care what it looks like, we're not damaging our ears today.
Good for him.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that maybe someone watching needs this word of encouragement. It's okay.
Well, and I appreciate your willingness to do that as a family because in your effort to do that without shame, or at least not enough shame that it's stopping you from doing that, you're
Hmm.
also contributing to your environment by adding some levity.
Hmm. Hmm. It's true. It's true. I'm sure that there are viewers thinking, "What in the world?" Oh, one person that's watching, Marybeth says, we've been enjoying the lake with the hotter weather. They live up in Michigan, and I can only imagine, especially for some spaces, the lake is such a refuge because maybe that's the one place like, ooh, the breeze, like the breeze off the cool water is still a great addition to the environment. And I'd love to hear from others who are watching. What are environments that you're enjoying right now, or what are your favorite spaces? And as you guys were answering those questions, you were also speaking to how those environments impact your health, your mental health, physical health. Um, and I wonder how often we struggle uh, to kind of to make that connection. Um, I automatically think of people who live in big cities, in apartments, who, in order to get to a park, have to, you know, do a few zigzags here and there before they can get. They don't just step out into nature; they step out into concrete, and maybe there's a tree, in the median or something. Um, but I wonder how hard it is for many of us to actually really appreciate nature just because of where we live.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that crime decreases where there is green space, and so I wonder if any of you watching have ever struggled with being able to enjoy nature. Please share that in the chat. Um, Here's a question. Um, well, it wasn't on my list of questions, and then it escaped my head, so never mind. um, are are there any spaces, and these don't need to be favorite spaces per se, but are there spaces that one of you likes and the other does not?
Well, when we were first dating, going back to him saying that he liked the loud concerts, that's definitely more of a, okay, I'll go because I like you, but.
Well, and that's really fascinating for me to think about because I think the live shows that we've gone to since we've met each other were comparatively for me quite subdued.
He spared you, Beth. He spared you.
Yeah, it could have been worse.
So that's real fascinating for me to think about because there were some shows that were. I mean, there's been a mix of shows because I enjoy almost every type of music. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Are there other environments maybe? Um, I don't know if there would be one that would be that stands out immediately. Like no, I couldn't. I couldn't
Mhm.
do. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't think so.
What about
maybe.
this? Oh, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I just said maybe we're quite fortunate in that way that there's not one of those.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Have you ever made changes to your environment for the sake of your physical or mental health? And it doesn't need to be, I mean, it could be like when I say mental health, it could be simply just like this makes me happier. It doesn't necessarily have to be what we would consider maybe a deep mental health concern, but it could be. And this could be at home, at work, obviously some place where you can in some way control the environment. Have you ever made changes for your own health's sake?
Um, the biggest thing that I was thinking about was our move. The last move we made for Chris's mental or work.
Being given the opportunity to have a different work environment, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that definitely had an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, I couldn't think of anything major.
Yeah, I mean, I think major wise, I mean, I think our having this incredible opportunity for this home, I hate to keep coming back to it, but it's a really relevant
Yeah.
example of being able to have a little bit of space, both within the walls of the house, but primarily the space outside of the house,
Mm-hmm.
which is both environment in indirect, but also environment in literal dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think to answer another way to answer your question is really coming back to this idea that I mentioned earlier about we're in constant relationship with our world. I think I would say I would kind of ask a question of when am I not doing something to influence or change my environment. Now, intent or not, maybe be a question there, but I think that's something that I'm constantly doing. As it relates to the amount of light that's in my room, as it relates to the volume of the music that I'm choosing to listen to,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that my door at the office may be open or closed, and the different ways that that would influence um, the relationship that I have with my coworkers and how that could potentially influence the work environment. I really think in some way or another I'm constantly doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I guess kind of going back to whenever you were asking about the kids and how with the environment with them,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always reminding them because of course they're siblings and they're close in age. There's gonna be lots of squabbles, and so and kind of just what God asks us to put into our minds and what we watch and what we listen to. God says that whatever is true and noble and all those things. So I try to remind my kids always when they want to watch this or watch that, and whatever goes in is what's going to start coming out, and it's how we're going to be treating each other and how we're going to create that environment within our relationships, and just treating each other with the fruits of the Spirit. We always are singing that song, the fruit of the Spirit song.
And no, we won't sing it for you
and,
because we have respect for your environment.
I'm just constantly reminding them are you treating each other with the fruits of the Spirit right now? And can we treat each other in a better way so that, our environment is healthier and we just enjoy each other more.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we try to find a way that we have that conversation from a perspective of awareness and intent, as opposed to a dynamic that we can slide into very easily from a Christian perspective, which is out of guilt and obligation.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't help.
Right. You may change something for a moment, but it's not going to be sustainable. Guilt doesn't help you sustain. There, again, a question I was going to ask you left my brain, but that's okay because I have questions written down. Let me see. Oh yeah, that was the question. So, I would assume, but I shouldn't assume. Or maybe I should ask it this way. How would you say having children has made you more conscious of the environmental decisions you're making?
I think it has it goes two different directions for me. So one, I think of environmental in the literal sense of my stewardship of Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the best version of this earth to exist for my kids and their kids. But then, we've talked a little bit about home environment. And so that's also, you know, I think as a parent, you find yourself having to think about that in ways that you never thought about when you weren't a parent. And that changes as your kids grow. So when we were little, it was like, all right, what is the height that all this stuff is at? Because I need to take it above that so that they can't pull it off the shelves. I need to make sure that all doors are locked so they can't get in there and drink the Drano. So, that kind of idea, which is very literal, to some of the stuff that we've already talked about around what's the energy of the house and what's the feeling of the house and how are we contributing to that.
Yeah.
I think, and also letting them, giving them some kind of autonomy to explore and kind of do things on their own as well. Like letting my son take his axe out and chop down some trees.
Yeah.
Just so they can, not feel so, that we're controlling them.
Well, I think that's incredibly important. And again, this is probably the psychologist in me influencing this, but it's not a concept that's just unique to a psychologist. I think hopefully it's something that all of us are thinking about. And especially as parents, we're thinking about that dynamic of how can we contribute to our kids' growth and development and to be a healthy, happy, functional adult. And that's instill some trust in them and some confidence in them by letting them experience and experiment. And again, I think that's where it comes back to an idea that I had mentioned earlier, is there's not necessarily just one way to do that. So I've learned a lot from being quiet and listening to other people's experience in life. And probably starting right here with this young lady, I've probably learned more from her than she even realizes.
One last question. If you could make an environmental change in your life from when you were younger, that you think would benefit you now, what would that be? Or what would you tell, like, how would you encourage your younger self when it comes to like taking care of the environment?
I guess for me it would just be, I feel like I spend quite a bit of time outside, but it can always be more. And I feel so much better when I've been outside for long periods of time. And I feel like with my kids, I need to, especially in the space we are now, I might need to force them at first, but just to spend more time outside, because I mean, just the heavens declare the glory of God. Everything in this earth is showing us how God is, and so the more we spend out time in nature, the more we're going to be in tune with Him and know about Him. So I think just spending more time outside. I maybe could have done.
Yeah.
I think I would have. I don't know if this is maybe not a really direct answer in the sense that it's tangible, but I would have loved to have had more awareness. But then I think if I would have had the awareness, I might have not had the learning process that was involved in awareness, and so I'm kind of arguing with myself about that. But I think probably a good one and is to be, I would want to tell my younger self to be more thoughtful about the impact I was having on the literal nature environment. on me. I think one of the things that we struggle with, probably as Americans, especially, as our tendency to consume things,
Hmm.
and in some cases quite unnecessarily. And so I think that that's definitely something I think more about almost every day, about the tendency to consume, and what is that doing to nature around me, and what can I do to give back,
Hmm.
not just take.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Um, I'm sure that many people watching can resonate. I hope at least that many people watching can resonate with what you've said, and or be challenged, encouraged by it to really make the choice. Because our first day we looked at choice, and the reality is that many of us have more choices than we think we do. Like Beth, when you were just talking about spending more time outside, I can only imagine myself like in college thinking, I've got to study, like I don't have time to be outside except to walk, to my classes or, back to my dorm room. Um, Rush, 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 if you're outside, you're probably wasting time. Um, but if we could see it, in this more holistic fashion, um, and I think, man, we would benefit so much. And so we have the choices, and it's up to us perhaps to slow down long enough to figure out, what they are, and then what our next steps can be. So thank you guys for joining us on this third day and looking at environment. Um, I appreciate you giving of your time, and I will talk with you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Chris and Beth. I really do hope that wherever you are, whatever your environmental situation may be, maybe when you think about environment, you're thinking automatically about recycling, and you're just like, I'd love um, to lighten my footprint. I'd like to, not consume as much, as Chris was just talking about. Maybe you see the recycling truck come, and your neighbor's bins aren't as full as yours, and you get a little self-conscious. Maybe there these things you're looking at right now, and you're like, how can I make this next step to improve my environment? Maybe you're in your home right now. Maybe you're at a desk like I'm at right now, and I will not show you my desk because this is not a good depiction, excuse me, of what I consider to be a helpful environment. Um, but that's why I let you look behind me at my wonderful plants and, pictures on the wall. Uh, but maybe there's a space you're thinking, man, I would love to be able to improve that, to make a just one step in that direction. I want to invite you to go back to day one if that's the case. And if you have this handy dandy workbook, then you can do this even more easily. But I'll give those of you who don't have the book an opportunity to still learn from one of the skill building exercises that are here. So for you, you may feel as though you're facing a dilemma, and your dilemma may be your environment. There's something about your environment that you're not satisfied with. And so this, in under the chapter about choice, page 9, uh, it's about figuring out your options. And so the exercise has you write down the dilemma you're facing. So jot that down, and then write down 3 options. Because so often, what stops us from taking that first step is that we don't realize the options we have. Maybe we only think there's this one thing, right? Like, if I want to clear my desk, if I want to get rid of clutter, you know, does it spark joy? And I'm not making fun of that concept at all, but we may feel as though I don't like that way of thinking about my clutter. I don't like that way of thinking about my space. So what am I supposed to do? well, it's more likely than not that you actually have at least two other options. So, what are your options for your next step? Because, friends, we do have the power of choice. It's one of the most incredible gifts that God gave to us from the beginning. And if I were Him, I would fully regret it. But it is out of His great love for us that He allows us to choose every day, every moment of the day. And hopefully, friend, you are choosing Him and allowing Him to guide your next steps. I hope to see you again tomorrow. If you have been watching but didn't comment to let me know that you're here, it's not too late. You can go ahead and do that so that I can make sure you're entered to win one of our great prizes at the end of these 8 days. If you registered, then now is a great time to hop over to Zoom and we'll chat a bit more there. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.